At the engagement banquet, Zain smiled lightly at me, but the smile did not reach his eyes. He said, "Maeve, this is where we stop. I will never marry the daughter of a murderer." The crowd gasped. I felt cold all over, staring at him in disbelief. The air seemed to freeze. I trembled as I asked him why. He walked towards me step by step, his long fingers pinching my chin. "Nico used despicable means to kill my father and took over the Jiang family's business. Now, I am merely reclaiming what belongs to the Jiang family." My father beside me turned pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, clutching his chest as he collapsed to the ground. I was taken aback, rushing over to hold my father, crying out for help from the crowd. But no one responded. The guests at the scene were only busy recording everything before them with their phones, whispering to each other, reveling in my misfortune. I was in utter despair, looking up at Zain. "Please," I cried, tears streaming down my face, "don't treat me like this." Zain looked down at me from above, his cold gaze piercing me like a dagger. That face that once fascinated me now felt so foreign it terrified me. My father struggled to raise his hand to touch my face, and I quickly grasped his hand. He spoke in a broken voice, "Maeve, I'm sorry." In the end, he breathed his last in my arms. In the dead of night, I woke up in a cold sweat. I dreamt again of the night of the engagement banquet. It has been half a year, and it still circles around my dreams like a vulture, gnawing at my soul from time to time. I calmed myself for a moment, slowly sitting up, my face drenched in sweat and tears. Click, the bedside lamp turned on. Rael, who was beside me, also woke up, looking at me with concern. "Did you have another nightmare?" I nodded wearily. Rael was the only friend willing to approach me after my family's downfall. After hastily handling my father's funeral, I fell seriously ill. Rael took me to her rented apartment. I was in a daze, sick for 2 months before gradually recovering. She poured me a glass of water. Holding the cup, I felt a pang in my nose and said, "Rael, I'm sorry, I dragged you into this." She immediately waved her hand dismissively and said, "What do you mean dragged me into this? That Kaya is just a despicable little person. Besides, isn't everything fine now?" Rael is an employee of a company under the Jiang Group and also my college roommate. Since our time in school, we have been inseparable. On weekends, if I am feeling better, she would take me out to do some part-time jobs together. Today happens to be Saturday, and we are helping to organize books at a children's library in the city. After work in the evening, I happened to run into Kaya. She was coming out of the luxury goods store next door with a few friends. Kaya is also my college classmate, who has always seen me as a thorn in her side. It's all because she is in love with Zain, who is with me. The Lin family has also contributed significantly to bringing down my family. Nowadays, she is Zain's senior secretary, almost inseparable from him in all public occasions. There are rumors that Zain's future bride will be Kaya. She has certainly gotten what she wished for. Kaya caught sight of me, raised an eyebrow in surprise, and then broke into a bright smile. "Oh, isn't this Miss Maeve? What brings you out, shopping?" "Oh, no, you must be out working to earn some money. After all, you're not the same as before." She feigned a sudden realization, and the fashionable girls accompanying her all covered their mouths and snickered. I suppressed the turbulent emotions in my chest and continued walking with Rael. "If you're really in trouble, I can talk to Brother Zain and ask him to help you. After all, you've been with him for 3 years, that must be worth something." She laughed heartily behind him. Rael was furious and wanted to argue with her, but I stopped her and looked at Kaya. "After all, this is between Zain and me, why do you have to jump in like a clown? Does anyone care about you?" Her expression changed suddenly, and she rolled her eyes to look at Rael. "By the way, I remember Rael is also from Zhang's company, right?" After saying that, she smiled charmingly and turned to leave. We had just arrived home when Rael received a call from HR, she was fired. I was so angry that I trembled all over, and my chest ached with pain. After hesitating for a long time, I finally pressed that number. The phone rang for a long time before it was finally answered. "Hello. It was still that cold, distant voice. I tried to speak calmly. Zain, what happened between us is over. Please don't involve my friend, okay? She is innocent. Zain was silent for a moment before asking, are you talking about Rael? Yes, why was she dismissed for no reason, just because she is my friend? I understand. His voice was calm, without a hint of disturbance. After hanging up the phone, a sharp pain surged through my stomach, as if countless blades were stirring inside. The pain brought me to my knees, and Rael was terrified, quickly finding medicine for me to take. I decided it was best to leave Lawn City. My grandmother has an old house in Jing City. My parents divorced when I was very young, and my mother remarried and moved abroad, disappearing without a trace. I lived there with my grandmother since I was little. When I was 6, my grandmother passed away, and my father took me back to Lawn City. The old house in Jing City has always been kept, unwilling to sell it, and I occasionally go back to take a look. This time, regarding Rael's matter, I reluctantly sought out Zain. Perhaps there will be many such things in the future. I really do not want to be involved with him again. I am very sorry for the innocent involvement of Rael this time. When Rael learned of my intention, she hugged me and cried uncontrollably. I can't bear to see you go. I wiped away her tears and smiled, saying, I can't bear to leave you either, but I want to try living on my own. The next time we meet, I will be better. She looked at me with tearful eyes and nodded. I still need to go to my home in Nanshan County. That villa has already been returned to the Jiang family, and for now, it remains untouched, just as it was. I want to take away my grandmother's belongings. If I lose them, I will never be able to find them again. The night was as dark as ink, and I made my way alone to Nanshan County. Upon entering the county, I passed through a small garden with pavilions and then followed a winding gravel path to my home. I didn't enter through the front door, I circled around to the back of the house. There was a narrow glass door against the wall. I touched a hidden hole in the wall, and the key was still there. In the past, I used to sneak back home from here after playing with friends until midnight. I successfully entered the house and groped my way through a dark, long corridor, turning into the living room. I paused for a moment. The floor lamp next to the sofa was unexpectedly lit. The light was warm, and a person was lazily leaning against the large sofa. Hearing the sound, he slightly turned his head. It was Zain. I didn't expect to see him again. His dazed eyes gradually became clear, a bit bewildered. He leaned against the sofa to stand up, his steps unsteady, and I caught a faint whiff of alcohol. The light shone on his face, revealing a hint of tenderness. What brings you here? His voice was low and weary. I lowered my head and let out a gentle breath, saying nothing, and turned to run upstairs. Never mind, I just need to find the things first. I entered the bedroom on the second floor, turned on the light, and everything remained the same. It was as if the owner of the house could return at any moment. I walked to a corner of the room and opened the safe deep in the cabinet. A wooden box wrapped in red velvet lay inside. I took it out to take a look. Inside were several old gold ornaments, including a bracelet and earrings, which I vaguely remembered my grandmother saying would be my dowry in the future. There was also a string of keys, pressed beneath some photos and letters. After confirming, I prepared to close the lid. A long, well-proportioned hand picked up the string of keys. He had come over at some point without me noticing. Whose keys are these? He asked, squinting as he examined them in his hand. I snatched the keys, ready to leave. He grabbed my arm, his voice carrying a hint of coldness. Where are you going? I found it amusing. Does it concern you? He pressed his lips together, twisted his wrist, and lifted me up, throwing me onto the bed. The wooden box in my hand tumbled down, scattering its contents everywhere. He leaned down and pressed me down. In my panic, I slapped him. He didn't dodge, just firmly pinned my arms to the sides. What are you going crazy about? Let me go. I struggled desperately. He remained silent, his dark eyes fixed intently on me. After a moment, I gave up struggling, feeling defeated, and said, "Let's talk this over." His eyelashes fluttered, and he lowered his gaze, gently resting his head against my neck, his warm breath stirring like a feather. "Maeve, do you hate me?" he asked, his voice muffled. My heart felt as if it had been violently tugged by a hand. I struggled to hold back the tears that were about to spill and coldly retorted, "What about you, do you hate me?" As soon as I finished speaking, he kissed me, the scent of alcohol mingling with his fervor and madness. Tears couldn't help but flow down my cheeks. I used all my strength to push him away, quickly getting up to the side to put the things on the ground into the box. He lay there without moving. "Will you stay by my side?" His voice was hoarse. I paused, looking at him in disbelief. One of his arms was pressed against his forehead, making it hard to see the expression on his face. I stood up. "Have you forgotten what happened?" After a brief silence, he said, "I haven't forgotten." I turned and walked away. Before leaving, I visited the cemetery. The father on the tombstone looked younger, still wearing that familiar smile. I placed a bouquet of fresh flowers and sat down on the ground. The sky began to drizzle, autumn was approaching, and the weather had turned much cooler. I don't know when I will come back to see him again. I walked out of the cemetery gate in a daze and called a taxi. I felt exhausted and weak all over, so I lay down by the roadside to rest while waiting for the car. A vehicle stopped in front of me. I looked up, and a black sedan pulled up. Zain got out of the car. Without a word, he lifted me and shoved me into the vehicle. As the car started, I looked at his profile and calmly said, "I've already called a cab, let me go, I don't have the strength to argue with you." He frowned slightly, still not saying anything, as the vehicle drove smoothly. I sighed and picked up my phone to cancel the taxi order. He spoke up, "Are you planning to go to Jing City?" I leaned against the side, staring blankly at the scenery outside, without answering. The last time I sat in Zain's car was a week before our engagement. He took me to Xingyue Lake to watch the fireworks. Now, however, it truly is a case of things being different and people changing. I unknowingly fell asleep. I woke up with a start. The car was parked by the roadside. The rain was getting heavier, and the water on the window was flowing in tangled lines. I quickly sat up, and some clothes slipped off. The familiar scent, a faint aroma of cedar, belonged to Zain. He was sitting beside me, looking down at his phone. I returned the clothes to him. "Have you arrived?" "No." He took the clothes and tossed them onto the back seat, and the car continued to drive. The texture of the clothes lingered on my skin, and I inexplicably felt a sense of panic. He dropped me off at Rail's house. Once inside, I collapsed onto the sofa and fell into a deep sleep. I booked a train to Jing City at 8 o'clock in the evening. The train station was noisy and crowded, and I embraced Rail, crying. She sobbed, "Maeve, you always have stomach aches. You need to eat well and avoid spicy food." I broke into a smile through my tears. "Got it, I won't eat it." It was only at the moment the train started that I truly felt I was leaving Lawn City. It was nearly 2 in the morning when I finally arrived at my grandmother's house. The house is in the old Eastern District, the community is quite old, and the facilities are dilapidated. The closely packed buildings can make it hard to breathe if you look at them for too long. The fluorescent lights in the old house barely illuminated the dim space. I quickly set up a room and managed to sleep for a few hours under some clothes. The next morning, I woke up and spent the whole day cleaning and organizing the house, and I also bought some items to do a simple decoration. By the time it was completely dark, I was lying on the sofa, too tired to move, but my mood was incredibly joyful. On the third day, I went for an interview at a cafe. The process went fairly smoothly, and the manager thought my appearance and demeanor were quite good, so I was hired. Thus, I began my new life in Jing City. Half a year has passed in the blink of an eye. I have completely gotten used to this place. It is a slow-paced little town in the Jiangnan region. Unlike the extravagant indulgence of Lawn City, there is only the comforting warmth of human life. It was a rainy day, and there were fewer customers in the shop, so I was tidying up the workbench. A female colleague beside me exclaimed while holding her phone, "Wow, the Jiang Group is investing in a hot spring hotel in our city. Another female colleague leaned over, excitedly saying, that super handsome CEO is coming too. I can't wait to see him in person. I paused my breath, and the work in my hands unknowingly came to a halt. Was this a coincidence? The Jiang family is rapidly expanding nowadays, with project investments happening all over the country. Perhaps it's just a coincidence. I shook my head, feeling increasingly restless. When I returned home in the evening, Fufu was already sitting at the door. Upon seeing me enter, it affectionately rubbed against my legs, its tail held high. Fufu is a stray cat I found in the neighborhood, a lovely little calico. It looked up and meowed, its eyes round and bright, and I picked it up and gave it a kiss. Thank you for this little life willing to accompany me. I got off work early today, so I went to the supermarket at the entrance to buy some ingredients. I have the next day off and plan to stay home all day. I was carrying my things home when I passed by a black sedan. The door opened behind me, and someone got out. I reached the entrance of the building, ready to go upstairs. Maeve. A familiar voice came from behind, and I paused. It was indeed not a coincidence. What are you here for? I frowned. Are you sure you want to talk here? He smiled slightly, his tone relaxed. A few neighbors came down from upstairs, their eyes darting between him and me, their expressions inscrutable. I turned to go upstairs, and he followed behind, his steps neither hurried nor slow. After getting home, he casually glanced around and naturally sat down on the sofa. This project was brought up by the company. When I saw it was Jing City, I agreed. He lay back on the sofa, his tone carrying a hint of fatigue. You're here to work, don't waste time with me. I squatted down and poured some cat food into Fufu's bowl. Fufu sensed the presence of a stranger and was hiding under the table, nervously observing this uninvited guest. Yes, I am here to work, and I am also here to take you back. He sat up straight, his tone leaving no room for doubt. I looked up, and he was also gazing at me, his eyes resolute. I immediately got up and walked towards the door. You go ahead, I won't go back with you. He got to the door before me, holding me tightly with both hands. Be obedient, come back with me. Zain, do you even know what you're saying? My anger surged. I know. Do I need to ask you again what you need? No, I haven't forgotten. Then why do you want to take me back, to humiliate me? No. I said it on the phone that time too, that our matters are settled. I don't owe you anything now. He pressed his lips together and fell silent. I broke free from his hand and walked over to the sofa to sit down. A fine, dense pain began to subtly emerge in my stomach. You should leave. I gritted my teeth, enduring the increasingly rampant stomach pain. He walked over, his tall figure blocking the light above my head. Whether I owe you or not is up to me, you must come back with me, he said in a deep voice. I was in so much pain that I was sweating profusely, and my hands and feet began to tingle. He crouched down, slightly furrowing his brow. Maeve, why do you look so pale? It had been a long time since I had stomach pain, and I thought I was better. I'll take you to the hospital. He looked anxious, raising his hand to prepare to hold me. No need, the medicine is on the bedside table in the room, just get it for me. I was in so much pain that I could barely speak. He paused for a moment, then picked me up and walked towards the room. I took 2 pills and curled up on one side of the bed, enduring the process of the medicine taking effect. Time passed so slowly. Zain patted my head and said, how about we go to the hospital? He reached out to hug me. Don't touch me, it hurts, I'll be fine in a bit. I still felt weak. I tightly closed my eyes and stopped talking. He thought for a moment and simply lay down, just like before, wrapping me in his arms from behind. I was surrounded by his warm body heat. Darkness had fallen at some point, and when I woke up and opened my eyes, my stomach felt much better. I moved a little, and he immediately leaned over to look at me. Feeling better? I turned to look at him, meeting his deep-set eyes, dark pupils, with specks of light like stars. I nodded slightly. Feeling a bit of strength returning to my body, I propped myself up and sat on the edge of the bed. I hung my head, as if a heavy stone was lodged in my heart. You never used to be like this. Yes, I never used to be like this. So why am I like this now? I smiled faintly. He wrapped his arms around me and said, "Come back with me, and we will heal properly." I pushed his arms away, stood up facing him, and calmly said, "Zain, because of Dad, I have always felt guilty towards you. In this situation, I also feel it is the punishment my family deserves, and I accept it. But I don't know what I still owe you now. Since you chose revenge back then, please continue to be steadfast in your heart, okay? Don't make me look down on you." His gaze was deep, and a hint of tenderness in his eyes gradually faded, revealing a cold light. "I've said it before, whether I owe you or not, it's up to me. Right now, I want you to come back with me. If you still have a little feeling for me in your heart, could you let me go? Let's part on good terms," I said almost pleadingly. He stood up, and a vast darkness enveloped us. "I am already trapped, I have no freedom, and neither do you." His unpredictability fills me with panic, as if he has turned back into that stranger. How could I forget that he is also a heartless person just because of his momentary tenderness? Since he was 8, he has lived in hatred, using any means necessary to achieve his goals. Naturally, he is more ruthless than anyone. What if I insist on not going with you? I looked into his eyes. He raised an eyebrow, the corners of his lips curling slightly. "Have you forgotten that Rael is still in Lawn City?" "You are truly despicable," I said with hatred. "Yes, that's how I've been living all these years." He clasped my neck with both hands and pressed a kiss on my lips. "Be good, I'll come to pick you up tomorrow." After Zain left, I lay in bed for a long time, my mind blank. Fufu jumped onto the bed, purring softly, its fluffy little head gently rubbing away the tears on my face. It lay beside me, tilting its head to look at me, and my heart softened. I reached out to pet it. In the short 6 months in Jing City, I lived quite peacefully. Every day was a 9 to 5 routine, with 3 meals a day. I even learned to knit and made a few little dresses for Fufu. I thought I would continue to live this simple and happy life. But why did it turn out this way? I returned to Lancheng. I didn't bring anything from the house in Jing City, just Fufu. It is a small light in my dark nights. He locked me in the house in Nanshan County and hired 2 caretakers to watch over me day and night. Outside the window, spring was in full bloom, and the gentle warm breeze made me feel as if I could smell the fragrance of the fragrant flowers. When I was a child in Jing City, there was a fragrant flower plant on my grandmother's balcony. During the blooming season, I always liked to move a stool and sit beside the flowers, greedily inhaling their fragrance, clear and sweet. I really miss the days in Jing City. Rael knew I was back and came to find me at the first opportunity. She had swollen eyes. "Why are you so foolish? I can just quit." "Rael, I know this job is very important to you." I shook my head. "Moreover, you shouldn't have been involved in this from the beginning. Even if you really resign, he has other ways. His goal is to force me to come back. As a friend, I respect your decision." She held my hand. "Just make sure you take care of yourself, don't. Tears welled up in her eyes. I understand what she means and nodded. She hugged me. "Anyway, as long as you take care of yourself, there will always be hope." "Yes, there will be. By the way." She wiped away her tears and handed me an invitation card. I took it, both surprised and delighted. "I'm getting married next month. Can you come?" She looked at me with anticipation. "Sure, I will definitely be there." I nodded solemnly. I called Zain to talk about this matter, and there was silence on the other end for a long time. Finally, he spoke up. "All right, I'll have the driver take you there, and come back early after it's over." On the day of Rael's wedding, I woke up early. The low couch in the dressing room and the floor were piled high with clothes, and I was headachy as I sifted through them. I also put on a bit of light makeup. I gave Rael a big red envelope and carefully prepared a gift. It had been a long time since I felt this happy. In the evening, the driver was waiting at the door. I got into the car and headed straight to the hotel for the wedding banquet. The wedding venue was bustling with excitement, filled with guests. The beautifully dressed bride shyly introduced me to her groom. A bashful and honest veteran, he was her elementary school classmate, and his gaze towards Rael was filled with love. I looked at the sweet couple, secretly envious. In the future, will there be someone who loves me wholeheartedly and takes me into a romantic wedding? To live a life of quiet companionship together. Of course, I know that person is definitely not Zain. Nowadays, there is a deep chasm between us. Some things have happened, I can choose not to think about them, but that doesn't mean I will forget. I will let these scattered bits of hope stand by my side, just to remind myself not to give up on escaping. After the banquet, I hugged Rael goodbye. The black sedan had long been waiting at the hotel entrance. I opened the car door, and Zain was sitting inside, the dim light outlining his clear silhouette. He naturally reached out to pull me in, displeased, and said, "Have you been drinking?" "Just a little." "You have a weak stomach, don't drink in the future." "Okay." When we got home, he followed me into the bedroom, and Fufu pounced at my feet, meowing. "Fufu, are you hungry?" I was just about to crouch down to pick it up. A pair of heated arms wrapped around me from behind, his deep breaths in my ear, his solid chest pressed tightly against my back. A long-lost fear surged in my heart, and I sobered up significantly, my body stiffening. He turned me around, wanting to kiss me. I instinctively pushed him away, nervously looking at him. There was a hint of anger in his eyes as he forcefully pulled me into his embrace, staring into my eyes. "I don't like the way you look at me like that." He frowned. "I want you to love me like you used to." A scalding, humid kiss swept over me, his fiery breath enveloping my entire being. I felt like a drowning person, reaching out but unable to grasp any lifeline. Morning light streamed into the bedroom, and I woke up. He was still asleep beside me, his breathing steady and deep, one hand resting on my waist. I carefully pushed aside his arm, put on my clothes, and went downstairs. Fufu was rolling on the carpet, pouncing on the dust in the sunlight. I sat on the sofa, captivated by this happy little creature. I couldn't help but lean down to pick it up and kiss it again and again. I heard footsteps behind me, and a warm embrace enveloped me. He leaned down and kissed my cheek. "If you want to go out for a stroll, just let me know, and come back early," he said softly. After he went to the office, I wandered around the house. The nanny seemed busy with her tasks, but her gaze was closely following me. I climbed to the third floor, opened a storage room, and dug out my old painting supplies. I carefully wiped them clean, wanting to pick up painting again. The repressed emotions inside me needed an outlet. I moved the painting supplies up to the rooftop balcony. The spring colors are bright, the wind is gentle, and standing here, I can see the distant misty mountains. Fufu followed me up as well. The rooftop is spacious and bright, and he excitedly dashed around, his fur shimmering with a halo of light. The nanny was worried and came up to check several times. Finally unable to hold back, she forced a smile and said, "It's windy up here, it wouldn't be good to catch a cold. Why not come down and paint instead?" I ignored her and quietly continued to paint Fufu in the sunlight. She had no choice but to leave in disappointment. These days, Zain hasn't come, and my mood has lightened a bit. Every day, I just climb up to the balcony to bask in the sun and do some painting, as if time has come to a standstill. On the weekend, I asked Rael to go shopping. We strolled around hand in hand like we did in college, eating and drinking along the way. "Look, now he even lets you go out freely, so there is still hope," Rael said, shaking my hand. I nodded, but couldn't feel happy inside. It felt like a crack had opened, and no matter how much joy poured in, it would slowly flow away. After watching a movie in the evening, when I came out, the dusk was thick, the streets were bustling with traffic, and the neon lights were dazzling. We said our goodbyes at the intersection and agreed to go shopping again next week. It's not far from Nanshan County, so I decided to walk back. The spring evening breeze is truly intoxicating. Passing by the entrance of the Liz Hen Hotel, a clear and slightly sharp voice called out, "Maeve," from not far away. I turned my head to see Kaya. What a coincidence. I felt helpless inside, smiled at her, and kept walking. She reached out to stop me. "What a coincidence, today Brother Zain brought me here to meet a client." She slightly raised her chin to look at me. I nodded and continued walking, really not wanting to engage in too much conversation with her. She grabbed my arm and sneered, "You really have no shame, coming back to look for Brother Zain after that incident caused such a stir back then. Do you think that just because he is with you now, he will marry you in the future? He's just keeping you around for fun. The one he will eventually marry is definitely me. Then please hurry up and marry him, okay?" I looked at her sincerely. "Don't get too smug." She glared at me, furious beyond measure. The hotel lobby was brilliantly lit, and a group of people was walking towards the entrance. Zain was chatting and laughing with someone, his face slightly flushed, as if he had drunk quite a bit. He looked up, momentarily stunned when he saw me, then quickly changed his expression and continued to greet the people around him. Seeing this, Kaya immediately went up to support him and playfully said to everyone, "Our CEO Zain has really had too much to drink today. We look forward to a smooth collaboration with CEO Heath." I breathed a sigh of relief and continued walking with my head down. "Oh? Isn't that the daughter of that person?" The CEO Heath, who used to be my father's business partner, recognized me. He pointed at me with his finger holding a cigarette and teased, "Oh, it's been a long time, Miss Maeve, still as beautiful as ever." After saying that, he stepped forward to pat my shoulder, and the overwhelming stench of smoke and alcohol made me feel nauseous. Zain grabbed him and laughed, "CEO Heath, we haven't finished our conversation yet." He was pulled aside. Zain quickly walked over again, anxious, "Maeve, wait for me, let's go together." Kaya beside him curled her lips, her expression dark. Before long, Zain hurried over, seemingly in a good mood. He wrapped his arms around me, a bit unsteady. I let the driver go ahead, "Let's take a walk." "What did Kaya say to you?" He turned to look at me. "Nothing," I replied nonchalantly. "You don't have to pay attention to anything she says. I have some dealings with her family, and this woman still has her uses." His casual demeanor made it seem like he was talking about something utterly ordinary. My heart suddenly tightened, heavy memories crashing down on me. "Just like how you used me back then?" I sneered. He paused, his grip on my shoulder tightening. "It's different." "All right, enough of that. What have you been up to today? Tell me about it." He casually changed the subject. I took a deep breath, suppressing my emotions as I chatted with him. I didn't want to provoke him. When we got home, the alcohol hit him, and he fell back onto the bed, pulling me close and not letting me leave. His face was pressed against my shoulder, his hot breath dampening the area. He mumbled, "Maeve, let me hold you for a while. You can't go anywhere. We have to be together forever." My heart ached, and as I looked down, he seemed to have fallen asleep, so I gently moved his hand away. His phone fell to the ground, and I bent down to pick it up. The screen lit up. On the screen was me, leaning against the car seat, fast asleep, covered with his clothes, the moisture on the car window blurring everything into a haze. I put down the phone, feeling troubled. The next morning, after Zain left, I sat on the sofa playing with Fufu. The nanny said with a strange expression, "Miss Maeve, maybe you should go out less in the future?" I asked in surprise, "Why?" She pointed to the phone I had set aside and said, "You should check the news." I felt puzzled and quickly scrolled through my phone. Someone had posted on a certain platform. The caption read, "So dramatic. The CEO of the Jiang family has a fiancé but is secretly meeting his mistress." A few photos were also attached, all taken last night as I left the hotel, walking side by side with Zain, who affectionately had his arm around me. The post was widely shared and commented on. "The fiancé is that Secretary Kaya, right? My God, how tragic. Isn't that mistress the daughter of that bankrupt Nico from before? Wow, the ex-girlfriend is back for revenge? What face does she have to seek revenge? It was clearly her father who caused the trouble first, and now her own family is in ruins. She deserves it. Looking at this situation, it seems like the two still have feelings for each other. Pfft, it's just the tricks of a green tea bitch. TSK, my heart aches for my fiancé. I heard she is about to get married. The mistress must die. The more I scrolled down, the colder my heart became. Even more so, someone posted photos from the engagement banquet back then, proudly saying, "I was there at the scene, witnessing the whole process." CEO Zain hated her family so much that her father died on the spot. Now she actually has the face to come back and seek affection. Unbelievable, it must be for money. A new comment floated up, and my blood ran cold. Someone went to the cemetery and splashed black ink on my father's tombstone. Next to the photo of Dad, there was a note, "Murderer." The commenter said, "Look at my masterpiece, ha ha ha." Below it were a bunch of likes and praises. My hands trembled slightly, unable to believe my eyes. I got up and ran out the door. The nanny chased after me, shouting, but I shook her off and quickly hailed a taxi. Standing in front of Dad's grave, my heart felt like it was being cut. My eyes were filled with filth, and I squatted down to wipe it away bit by bit. It simply cannot be erased. I couldn't help but cry out in pain. I don't want to wait any longer, not even for a moment. I shouldn't have been entangled with him again. Being by his side only brings endless suffering. I can see no hope at all. The phone on the ground buzzed incessantly, all calls from him. I turned off the phone and hurried towards the cemetery gate. Just a few steps out the gate, my arm was suddenly yanked. I turned around, and there he was again. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression gloomy. "Come with me." Without giving me a chance to refuse, he grabbed me and pushed me into the back seat of the car parked nearby. He then got into the car and closed the door. The driver stepped on the gas and sped away. I struggled to get up and grabbed the driver's arm, shouting, "Stop the car, let me out." Zain yanked me back, holding me tightly in his embrace. I broke free and raised my hand to slap him. This was the second time I had hit him. The driver nervously glanced at the rearview mirror. Zain suppressed his anger, tightly gripping my hands, and coldly said to the front, "Return to Nanshan County." Upon arriving at Nanshan County, he dragged me up to the room on the second floor, holding me tightly despite my resistance. "I don't want to stay here, I want to go back to Jing City," I shouted hysterically. "You are not allowed to go anywhere," he tightened his arms. "What right do you have to restrict me? Haven't you already caused me enough trouble? I will handle this matter." He was slightly out of breath, his tone somewhat unsteady. "No matter how you handle it, I don't want to see you for even a moment." I struggled again. He still held me tightly, not loosening his grip at all. I finally broke down and cried, leaning on his shoulder, my clothes soaked through. He said nothing, resting his chin on the top of my head, his large hand gently stroking my hair. I don't know how long it took, but I gradually stopped crying, softly sobbing. He slowly released me, and I looked up at him. "You want me to stay by your side just to see this, don't you? Watching me suffer, letting me sink deep into the despair of the past, do you hate me that much?" His gaze flickered, and a hint of sadness surfaced in his eyes. "Actually, you can't face the past either, can you?" I continued to stare at him and said, "Since none of us can face it, why do we need to be together and torment each other?" He grasped my shoulders with both hands, lowered his head, his expression unclear. "Maeve, I don't know what to do, I really don't know. I once convinced myself to let you go, but I just can't. From the moment you called me, I wavered. Later you went to Jing City, and for that half a year, I was in torment every day. I really missed you. I know I'm deceiving myself, thinking that as long as I can keep you by my side, there will still be a chance for everything to turn around." I bit my lip, holding back tears. You want me, you can't let me go, so you keep me close, but you never ask if I want that. But other than that, I don't know what to do. He took a deep breath, his shoulders trembling slightly. I'm afraid of this feeling, I don't like it at all. Just like that year, watching helplessly as my father lost his breath. I don't know what to do to make him stay in this world. I really can't do anything about it. It's like being trapped in darkness, unable to find a way out. I'm so scared. Maeve, what should I do? He lowered his head, his eyelashes trembling, tears falling drop by drop. The room was so quiet that it seemed the only sound was breathing. After a long while, I gently caressed his cheek, wiping away his tears. He looked up, momentarily lost in thought. The gloom that had gathered in his brows and eyes gradually faded, becoming clear in an instant. He kissed my forehead. You stay at home obediently, I'll handle things and be back soon. Rael's call came in, and she said anxiously, Maeve, are you okay? Where are you? I'm in Nanshan County. I'll come keep you company. It's fine, Rael, I want to be alone for a while. Well, if anything happens, you must tell me, okay? Don't keep it to yourself. Okay. After hanging up, I turned off my phone. I leaned against the floor-to-ceiling window, the sunlight shining brightly on me, making it hard to open my eyes. Outside, the spring scenery was enchanting, with the sound of swallows and a gentle breeze, and endless vitality all around. The little girl in the pink dress was walking, her hair coming loose, while her grandmother stood by, carefully tying it back for her. The roses on the low wall were in full bloom, and the boy secretly picked one to give to the girl he loved. Ming, I can do this too. Why not? I rubbed my aching eyes, left the room, and walked up to the balcony on the top floor. Zain came back, rushing over in a fluster. I stepped over the railing and stood on the edge of the balcony. Maeve, don't, come here quickly. His face was pale. The wind blew into my eyes, dry and painful. Zain, I can empathize with your experiences and suffering. It's just that I can't save you. I've been sick for a long time, a very serious illness. I want to live, but I can no longer. No, we can treat the illness slowly, it will get better. His voice trembled slightly. Please come here, Maeve, I beg you. He knelt on the ground, tears streaming down his face, his expression twisted in pain. I promise you, I will never trap you again, you can go wherever you want. Zain, you love me very much, don't you? A sense of calm filled my heart. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with fear. If I killed a person you love, would that be revenge against you? I opened my arms and fell backward. Don't. His desperate scream faded into the wind. As I fell, the wind howled past my ears. I saw my grandmother, I saw my father. I also saw Zain from a long time ago. I seemed to smell the clear fragrance of the blooming mycelia. After she left, he locked himself in the house, seeing no one. Everywhere here is filled with her presence. Strands of hair fallen on the pillow. Clothes in the closet that were not tidied up in time. Unfinished paintings scattered on the floor. The fingerprints imprinted on the metal frame of the glass window. And the warmth of her palm that has not yet faded. In one corner of the bed lay her nightgown. He gently picked it up, greedily inhaling its scent, as if it were fading away. A sweet metallic taste surged in his throat, and he rushed into the bathroom, vomiting blood uncontrollably. He looked up at himself in the mirror. A vacant gaze, increasingly gaunt cheeks. Lifeless. He carefully wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. After leaving the bathroom, her little cat had somehow settled on the bed, its paws tucked under its body, and it let out a soft meow at him. He sat on the floor, leaning against the bed, locking eyes with it. The little cat squinted, stood up to stretch, and walked over to him. Its fluffy little head rubbed against his forehead, purring softly. He suddenly understood why she loved this cat so much. He reached out to stroke its sleek, shiny fur, meeting its round, bright eyes. He asked, "Can I go find her? Will she see me?" The little cat's wet nose gently touched his nose. His heart felt like it was being torn open by a bloody hand, so painful that it couldn't make a sound.